The 360 on Energy and Carbon, hosted by 360 Energy. On today's episode, we are joined by Jana McDonald. Jana's background in communication, negotiation, and corporate development in the oil and gas industry has stewarded her passion for integrating her network and client base into the carbon markets. Beginning with carbon trading in early 2020, she identified the lack of credit development for profit within Canada. Since founding Guardyan Conservation, Jana has analyzed the feasibility of projects ranging from agriculture to transportation, technology, efficiencies, renewables, solar, and land use. She's a hands-on leader who continues to expand Guardyan's influence in client base through the development of millions of credits per year. Now let's get into the episode with Jana. Welcome back, Dave and John.
It's great to be back.
Boy, the week went quickly, didn't it? Wow, yeah. That's unbelievable.
It always does. On today's episode, we're joined by guest Jana McDonald, founder and CEO at Guardyan Conservation. Welcome, Jana.
Thank you.
Well, Jana, this is a real pleasure. You're in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm really excited about the topic, but I think a lot of our listeners may know and appreciate that Alberta is the sort of the oil and gas capital of Canada, but not many people realize that a lot of innovation occurs in the energy sector, not just the oil and gas sector. And so I'm really excited to talk to you because I think the stuff and the work that you're doing and have been doing is quite innovative from the early days. So thank you. I'll lead off with the question. And so the question to you is, how did you actually start this journey in your organization? How did that actually happen?
Well, it started back in, I suppose, 2020. I was a baby at the time. I was 25 years old, and I was doing business development for an engineering firm in Calgary. I know you laugh there. I'm still a baby. I know. I'm sorry, David. I was looking for integrity budget because this was right in the heart of COVID. And that integrity budget that was it was the only thing left in the budgets for some of the major companies. And I was trying to ensure that, my engineers could pay their mortgage. So that was how it started. I got introduced to this concept of carbon credits and thought, okay, well, if I can identify an emission reduction project that we could design that could potentially generate carbon credits, then perhaps we could, kind of offset this spend, specifically when these budgets are so tight. And so that was how I kind of got introduced to the concept. And then it was one really sophisticated, large organization in oil and gas here in Calgary that had done an emission reduction project. They had generated about 1 million carbon credits or 1 million emission reductions. And they sold those credits for $9. And I happened to know at the time that the value of those credits was closer to $21. And so I kind of sat there and thought, I might be about 5 seconds ahead of this really sophisticated company. I might have something here. And so from there, I ventured into the voluntary carbon markets and attempted my first kind of off the side of my desk trade. And from there, bootstrapped the company. It was originally called Enviro Capital Solutions, and that's why I'm not allowed to name companies anymore. I partnered with Obsidian Engineering right at that time. They were a team of only about 60. I came on as the corporate development officer and partnered with Mark Czajkowski, the CEO over at Obsidian, in order to build both companies at the same time. And so that's kind of what we did. Obsidian Engineering has grown to a 280-person team, and Guardyan grew into a 12-person team. And so we have subject matter experts and a design team.
So you smelled a market opportunity. So you saw pricing signals that people didn't see. Yeah. That's what you saw.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Okay, my question's sort of going to follow on from this. Dave sort of alluded it to in the introduction that, you're in Calgary, and Calgary is a bit well known for oil and gas. And some people could say, well, that's the last place in the world that you really should be thinking about starting a business in carbon credits. So why did you? Why Calgary?
Oh, because I would say it's the exact opposite. I remember, again, it's these funny, core memories that come up where I'm like, that's when that happened. That's when that happened. I was sitting on a plane and I was reading an article by The Guardian, and they were criticizing McKinsey & Co. for working on emission reduction projects with heavy emitters. And the CEO, I believe it was the CEO of McKinsey, wrote back in a letter to the editor saying, why would we not start with the heaviest emitters? Why would we not start in the industry that has the most impact or potentially the most impact to leverage? And so that's exactly why I find that the energy sector has, specifically in Canada, the energy sector has so much technology, so much innovation, and so much appetite to be better. I think that's something that makes our energy sector absolutely remarkable. Quite frankly, I'm quoting Katie Parent-Smith, so I should give her credit for that. But the energy sector for me was exactly the first place to start, specifically because I had that background in business development. I had the relationships, or a lot of relationships, in place. And so although it was kind of, when I started to approach people as Guardyan as opposed to Jana from Obsidian, there was definitely a little bit of like, no, thank you. Go back to business development, please. But with a lot of resilience, we kind of pushed through those barriers. And then I would say that those same individuals that were kind of like, would you mind staying in the role that I'm comfortable with you being in, actually ended up being my Everest team in the end. That was a long-winded answer.
Can I just applaud you for your persistence? There's so many people that start businesses, and in the field that you're in and working with large corporations, they tend not to want to work with small companies because it's too risky.
Holy moly,
right?
yes.
But you actually made it through. And it's a lesson for our listeners to understand that actually this is completely doable. You have to be really persistent and just dig in. I think that no one will go away because they know that you're just going to dig in. So congratulations on that piece.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for that bang. That was my partner leaving, but he's gone now. So I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
And thank you for saying that.
I was going to follow up, and I thought it was interesting the comment that you were made about McKinsey being sort of kicked for working with polluters. And I can remember a long time back, I worked with a gentleman who had been one of the leading lights in the Greenpeace movement, but he'd become an independent environmental consultant. And he and I did a project on a cement plant. And he got an awful lot of trouble saying, why on earth are you working with a dirty company? And his point was, it's the dirty ones we've got to clean up. So I think sometimes the counterintuitive is actually the intuitive, isn't it?
I completely agree. Where we have the most impact, and not necessarily the lowest hanging fruit, because that's not the intention, is to knock out the easy stuff. But certainly if the lowest hanging fruit in a heavy polluting industry is significant megatons of impact, let's go ahead and knock those out.
Yeah.
I also need to give some credit. Sorry, I'm leaning back to you, David, to say that two statements I wanted to make. One was my dad taught me from a really young age that we make up in numbers what we lack in skill. And certainly that was a huge part of it. I remember in those early days, I forced myself to reach out to 100 people a day, every single day on LinkedIn. And I used it as a huge tool, specifically when we were kind of growing brand awareness. And I would suggest that I think I had a kind of a callback rate of about 3%. And then I thought, okay, 3% is enough. That is enough to 3 is better than 0.
Well, I got to tell you that 3% is above normal.
Yeah.
So you were doing something right, Jana. You were doing something right on that.
Just editing that copy, paste, send, and trying to be as genuine as possible. The other piece that's really important to note is that I have an incredible team, and I have the most amazing partner in Guardyan. Her name is Kayla. And I was laughing earlier when you asked how to pronounce my name, because her name is Kayla, but it's spelled Kaila. So it looks like Kyla. So we get Jana and Kyla constantly. So if ever anybody gets it right that first time, I'm always like, oh, well done. But Kayla is my partner in Guardyan and also my chief engineer. And I just have to very blatantly say that if it wasn't for her partnership and for her just heart-stopping resilience, we certainly wouldn't be here today. We've considered getting tattoos, which I'm glad that we didn't do, that said, I've got you if you've got me. And so being able to have that person to rely on all the time, and to be like, when I'm completely burnt out, she goes, okay, I'm going to take some weight this week, and vice versa. And without that team and the rest of the incredible individuals on our team, there's no way I would have quit.
Completely understand. Completely. So thank you for sharing that too.
Absolutely.
Well, Jana, this is a pretty timely episode as International Women's Day is 2 days away. It's inspiring to see women like you leading the way. As a female-led organization, what unique perspectives or approaches do you believe you bring to the carbon credit market, and how does this influence your strategy?
This is such a hard question to answer because obviously, like all of us, I have some, or I've seen and participated with some incredibly kind and loving and soft-spoken and upbringing or uplifting male leaders. And so I wouldn't necessarily consider those characteristics to be female, but I certainly have some gentle helicopter mom characteristics in myself. But that being said, what I actually think it is that we're relentless problem solvers. And I don't know if that's a female thing or if it's just a Guardian kind of cut from the same cloth thing. But we started to take on projects in the beginning, specifically as a small entity, what you were talking about, David, by taking on the projects that some of the bigger companies wouldn't take on because it didn't fall within their timeline to ROI effectively. And these are some really cool, really complicated, convoluted projects that have, different time zones, different jurisdictions, different geopolitical nuances, so many different barriers to break through that absolutely we understand now, 2 years later, now that we've done it, why these other companies said no. But I think that our mentality as a female-owned entity is that, we wholeheartedly take care of each other. And I mean, seriously, take care of each other and take care of our clients. We maintain the strictest level of integrity that we possibly can. We're really lucky that we've never been under investigation. We've never had any of our projects questioned, which is fantastic. And it'll lead into kind of one of the later questions. But I think that we lead the company the way that we want to be seen. And it was really hard to get to that point, or the way that we want to be represented. It's like, what do you want on your tombstone? Or what do you want people to say? Why am I getting morbid? What do you want people to say about you when you die? When Guardian is long gone, I want people to say that was a company that didn't sacrifice their integrity and didn't sacrifice their team or their clients in order to get anywhere. So I cannot say that that's a female thing, but I can say that that's a Guardian thing.
An interesting answer, yes, because I sometimes think we could get into the whole gender issue of, what's what and what's not. Can I, as a supplemental, one of the things I'm convinced of is that you actually need the right mix of people in a team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe an all-male organisation isn't I will speak from past experience, an all-male aggressive team is not actually a very effective team. Makes a lot of noise, but it doesn't get a lot done.
And same with an all-female team. We also make a lot of noise. I shouldn't say we. My team is not all female. That's important. It's important that we didn't, what's it called? Reversify instead of diversify, where you go way too far in one direction. And it's exactly that. It's an echo chamber. And specifically in entrepreneurship, being in an echo chamber can often lead to you drinking your own Kool-Aid. And that is the worst thing that you can do. You have to have people push back on you and say, Jana, that's a bad idea, from inside and outside the company. And that typically comes from different upbringings, experiences, education.
Okay, I think you've almost gave an introduction to the next question, but this is the right place for it. Globally, we know that there are a lot of people who are highly critical of carbon credits and offset projects, and with good reason. There has been a lot of false carbon sold. There have been entities that have been prosecuted. People have been jailed. There's been all sorts of negativity. So the question for you is, what have you done to avoid those problems?
I love this question, and I love it because so far we've been able to avoid those problems. And so I'm going to say, ask me again in 3 years. But this industry is an innovative industry that's evolving at the same time as it's creating innovations. And so that is a messy place to be. When I started out in the industry, I called it the Wild West, 100%, always. And it was so loosely regulated in certain aspects, and then also incredibly tightly regulated in other aspects. But the community was so small that, specifically playing in that like Australian and South African market, there was like 4 entities back in 2021. And that's an exaggeration, probably 10. But globally, we all knew who each other were within, a really short period of time. And so that allowed for us to learn the nuances of the market really quickly, because immediately we had some friends, specifically John within the UK. We have counterparts in the UK that have guided us really well, being that the UK is a little bit further along in understanding the voluntary market. And in Canada, we're much more focused on compliant. But whenever we get questioned about the validity of carbon credits, which is on a daily basis, we just try and bring it back to kind of the basics and also the intent behind the carbon credit. And so I really like the example of, there's a project that just got registered, I believe on the CDM, and it's one guy, and he goes out and he picks up all this brush, and basically what he's doing by himself is improved forest management. He's going out into forested areas and he's collecting all the brush and all of the stuff that's really flammable. And he applied for carbon credits in order to do this. And he got a couple of them. And those couple of them motivated him to keep doing this. And then he got a couple more. And then it allowed him to pay for somebody to help him. So now he can do more. And that's really the intention of the carbon credit, is to incentivize companies to continue towards emission reductions or reward companies for emission reductions that they didn't have to take based on regulatory or permitting requirements. And so when we take a look at it that way, and when we are trying to demonstrate that a carbon credit is just a financial instrument, it's just a transformative tool that will allow companies to recognize the benefit and be rewarded for their emission reduction so that they keep doing it. We are not a society that leans into the stick, right? We are very carrot driven. And so this is, as the organization, as the industry becomes more and more evolved and more regulated, we're seeing very proper recognition and reward for those carbon credits. For those emission reductions through carbon credits. Now, we have something every week, and it's called a policy update, and it's internal, and it's where basically one of our team members scours the news for all of the different updates that are taking place. And it's really important that we basically keep a handle on the social perspective of where the carbon markets are at, because they influence the price of the credits. For sure they do. And so we saw for a while a really big surge in REDD+ credits or in forestry specific credits, huge surge. All of the major entities were purchasing them. They are easy for the layman person to understand. They're very aesthetic, these forestry projects. They look great on a homepage. There's no association to oil infrastructure, gas mining, any of that. And then we see, 18 months later, so many investigations and fraudulent credits and double counting. And so it's so unfortunate. But what that kind of led to was Guardyan wanting to be a bit of an authority in the market and, having the ambition as this small team to create transparency and integrity within the market. I know I've said that too many times today, but it's kind of one of our milestones. And so the way that we have countered those issues of transparency is a couple different things. I'm going to talk about one specific project that we executed. So this was our first project. It's a greenhouse gas avoidance methodology, and I'll leave it at that because it's a little bit proprietary until later this month. But for that project, we wrote the methodology, and we had a number of third-party individuals come and basically poke holes in it. And we didn't stop until we filled those bullet holes with titanium, so that nobody could ask us. We had an answer for every single question that could possibly be posed, no matter how it was posed. Then we got it verified by a third party, of course, obviously. Then we went further because this project was a first of its kind and had it audited by EY out of the UK. Then once we were able to get that approval, then we took it to the insurance class. And so we wrapped that project in an insurance policy with a really appropriate price associated to it. And that is what allows for that project to be viable within the voluntary market, no questions asked. So those are some of the things that we do to protect our clients. Realistically, that's what we're doing. Because Guardyan is a methodology writer, we're a project developer. We can be a verifier, obviously, for projects that we don't touch. Because of those things, what we have to do is really protect the asset, protect the carbon credit market, which I know sounds silly, and protect the client. And that also includes protecting the purchaser of who's purchasing those carbon credits owned by our client. So the third-party verification, critical. Picking the right registry that has the same level of integrity that we hold for ourselves. Choosing purchasing partners that are, highly credible and pass the due diligence. And then ensuring that you have those credits wrapped in an insurance policy, which is hard to do, but not impossible. And once it's done, it's like everybody takes a big sigh of relief. And I do feel like that project is going to have a significant impact on the carbon credit industry. We reduced 671 million tons of emissions through that project. So it is ranked one of the largest on Earth. So we had to make sure that it was like airtight.
I think there you've probably defined what a good quality carbon offset is.
Well, there's something that we like to say, and it's a coined phrase. It's certainly not a technical term, but we call them charismatic credits. And so that is a credit where there's been a number of STEM minds, we'll say. There's been a considerable amount of capital put into the project, considerable amount of study, and there's usually infrastructure involved. And so when we're selling credits that are based on effectively what I'm saying is oil and gas or infrastructure, we can get very clear about how those emission reductions are taking place, and we can monitor them extremely well. And so that's the other piece that offsets the alternative of the forestry style credits. And I should note that when I say forestry style, I mean afforestation, reforestation, because they're really hard to monitor. You know, we have lots of different things that we can do, like LiDAR and different volumetric data indexing softwares. There's things that we can do. But when you're, reading off of a metering station, there's no questions asked. So those charismatic credits are really where we like to play because we can justify them so well.
Jana, before I ask my question, I just want to sort of summarize what I heard. Again, this is kind of a lesson for our listeners. Would you define yourself as a kind of a boutique operation? Or are you that size, or do you think you're a larger type of organization in your field? What would you?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily call us boutique because we tend to take on what would be considered major projects. And by that, I mean either the tons of CO2 removed or the capital associated. So that being said, we're only a team of 12. We do have counterparties in the States, in the UAE, in the UK, and in South America, which helps us look really big and helps us have a really big reach. But we're a small, lean, mean team.
Yeah, I should have framed it better because actually someone defined us the same way and I didn't like it. But where I wanted to go with this is that because of your organization, your values, who you are, you will want to do things better than anyone else.
Yeah. Because
that's actually your calling card, not only to the work you do, but for future business. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. And that happens a lot with smaller organizations because big organizations get away with because of their name. People hire them because of their name. Organizations like yourself and perhaps companies like ourselves, like we have to do the job because that's our next calling card, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I loved, because in the energy industry, there has been some bad players in the energy industry, and we get all impacted by those bad players. So when you have someone who has transparency and integrity, that's what we need in the industry to make people change, because most people get impacted by those bad players. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, I should get to my question. So what was your initial challenges when you first started in the industry, when you got into the carbon credit sector? What challenges did you have initially that you had to overcome? Can you share with our audience
what that was? Yes. One of them that I look back on now that I didn't realize at the time is being a baby. I was so young at 25, and I know I'm only 29, but I would suggest that I have learned and grown up more in the last 4 years than, I did in the first 24. So, and even then, just not looking the way that individuals wanted me to look within this particular role. And I know that sounds silly, but I'll say this. Last year, there was an article in Sustainable Business Canada, and they featured me for International Women's Day, and they said that I replaced ceilings with trampolines, and I thought that was a really cute line. But I would suggest that, and there were pieces, where they said that when I walk into a boardroom, the counterparties think, why is there a 12-year-old in our office, and funny things like that, and right, it's just part of the process. And so I certainly think that being a young woman gets me in rooms that would be more difficult if I was a man, for sure. There's something to that. But also, I think that as a young woman, people want me to be the CEO of a feminine centric product. That's what they want to see. We see female CEOs from Bumble and from Spanx and from, those are who we think of. Female CEOs in this role, this is not what the industry expects. And so there was a lot of pushback on, do you have, like, genuinely, it was almost like, do you have a man that I can speak to? And now things continue to progress within the energy sector, and things get better and better each year. But I also was raised by three older brothers and my parents. And so, like, raised by wolves. So I'm going to swear, I don't take a lot of shit and have continued to stay that way. I had a conversation with my dad that he reminded me of before this podcast. And it was a time that I called him and I said, I'm done. I quit. I'm done. I'm out. I'm not doing it anymore. And he said, yeah, that's one choice. That's a choice for sure. And if you make it, then it's the right one. Or you could also just say, screw them, and push as hard as you can. Just give it one last go, one last push. And that was 2 years ago, I believe. And so since then, a few things have changed. One, my dad is actually on salary at Guardyan. He's our senior advisor in research and business development. He is the Guardyan gatekeeper. He certainly vets companies and interactions, and there's two things to that. One is there's so much like kind, confident security in a lot of the decisions I make in the meetings that I go into, knowing that I have, him in my corner, genuinely in my corner. Sorry, I started to monologue about my dad, but those first early challenges were, one, we had no cash flow, none. We've never accepted investment to date. We've only, as of these last few weeks, gone out for investment in our seed round. So we have had to stretch and reach and borrow and, stuff like that. So that made it incredibly challenging, specifically with regards to the emission reduction business model, or our business model, which is that we do consulting fee work up front for the duration of the project. And it's not where we get our revenue. It's not, but it is so that we have a bit of a degree of control with regards to the projects going forward, because there are some bad actors in the industry. And if we are associated to a project that is associated to a bad actor, then we need to be able to have some control to make sure that it goes forward in the most integral way possible. But then we also take a portion of the carbon credits at the end as an asset. And that's where our company valuation comes from. But that can be, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years down the line. So we had to get really creative with how we were going to continue to grow our team bootstrapped. We also, another one of the challenges was that early on, nobody wanted to work with us. They just wanted to buy us, which is great. It's very flattering. It's really cool. It's also what would take away our ability to be Guardyan and to be lean and be nimble and be able to work without bureaucracy. So that was really challenging too, because once they got through the entire process of, trying to court us and buy us, then they didn't want to work with us. They just wanted to go on and buy another company so that they could do that work. So that was incredibly challenging at first as well. And then just the fact that the market changes so frequently and that it is such a technical market. So our team is built up of half communications and half technical team, with our engineers, our PhD, our scientists, and then our communicators. And the reason for that is because we found, again, one of the challenges, I know this is a long-winded answer, but I'm trying to get there. One of the challenges immediately out the gate was that some of the greatest projects that we interfaced with had an individual at the helm that was either an engineer or a scientist or an inventor who didn't know how to communicate their technology to the greater public. And so they weren't getting funding, weren't getting proper PR representation. So that became part of our scope, was in helping these companies or these individuals communicate what they're trying to do. And then that's when Guardyan really started to get momentum, was we were kind of seen as being associated to these really cool projects. And we were the ones, speaking to them.
My second part of the question, I think you answered, and that is, how the heck did you overcome it? But I want to, because a dad of 2 daughters, there's nothing they can't do. There's nothing they can't do. So your dad has taught you right. And good on you and him for that. So I'm really glad to hear this and hear you talk about that. That's fantastic.
Thank you. We call him Randad. His name is Randall, but I always call him Dad all the time, even when we're in meetings or podcasts or whatever. And so the team started calling him Randad. It's the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life. Even clients, it's great. Yeah. I think maybe one thing to talk about, just with regards to how did we overcome it, is scope creep. That's how we overcame it, was by taking on ownership of things that were getting in the way of our project success. So whether it was like, oh, we can't do this because, there's no policy in place. Well, okay, well, we could potentially see if we could impact policy. Do you want us to do that? And then the company would say yes. So then now, we're not lobbyists, but now we're part of government relations or investor relations. And so we just kind of started to take on more and more so that we could push our, at first, limited number of projects through. And then once those impossible looking projects started to become monetized, then it was sort of like we overcame that. We overcame those hurdles through that process, through increasing our scope and really being a full service hands-on provider. That's probably how.
You ultimately became a strategic partner of that organization that they didn't have, really. That's what you were able to do. Yeah.
Yes. We changed our model a few times.
Thank you so much for a great episode on the carbon credit sector. What is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I know you warned me. You warned me that it's the best question. The biggest takeaway should be that the carbon markets will continue to evolve and they will continue to become more sophisticated. And the best thing that we can do as Guardyan is continue to create education and awareness around this market and around a company's opportunity to either integrate in it or kind of dip their toes in. We found that the greatest barriers to market were things like the waiting times for reaching a registry, the lack of confidence in verification, and one of the biggest things was actually human manipulation of data associated to these projects. And so I'm going to do a plug really quickly and then say that's the most important takeaway. Guardyan chose to tackle these issues within the market by automating our service offering and creating a data consistent. And I always use my terminology wrong when it comes to data tech, so forgive me. But we created what's called the Guardyan Carbon Management Platform. We've been working on it for about 10 months and it will be ready for our beta users in June. And what it is the only technology on the market that is all three: a project management or project development forum with showcasing capabilities, a registry for those carbon credit projects, and finally a marketplace. And it allows third-party vendors to actually access the project on the platform as opposed to taking it off and passing that project, which is really the paperwork associated to proving it, passing it to the engineering firm and passing it back, passing it to the auditing firm and passing it back. When those data sets get manipulated through either human manipulation or through error, effectively, that project can be invalidated. And so we partnered with an entity called Vivid Theory, and they have an extremely impactful and proprietary technology called Big Geo, and it is a volumetric data indexing platform. And I know that's way too much information, but what it does is it allows our platform to basically be blanketed over anybody's data or information, and we can index it and make it communicate with each other. And so this product is effectively, because I'm very confident and optimistic, going to replace registries such as Vera, CDM, American Carbon, and it's going to allow for one streamlined process. And our partners include S&P Global and Snowflake, so the world's largest data warehouse. So the biggest takeaway is that there are individuals like myself and like my team at Guardyan who are putting in the time, the effort, the money, the energy, and the subject matter experts in order to create transparent and consistency within the market. And we hope to become an authority by creating that data consistency and data communication.
John, what's your biggest takeaway?
It's a difficult one because there's quite a few things, but it's amazing what you can do with integrity, enthusiasm, determination, and a different business model. And I thought, yeah. And then I thought, actually, and Jana, you touched on something when you were talking about the inability of engineers and people to describe and communicate projects. And I think with a lifetime of work in the sustainability, engineering, carbon, whatever sector, the number of problems I have seen because of somebody's inability to communicate is massive. And I think improving our communication has got to be a real key thing to do. So that's my takeaway.
Dave, what's your biggest takeaway? Oh, sorry.
My takeaway is this energy transition is rapidly going. We've talked about this before, but every guest we speak to is talking about the speed and the change of what they're doing, and they can't stand still. I'm also hearing digitization going on, as we've heard with other people. So this is not for the weak. This is not for people that want to stand still. This is a happening thing, and I think you're a great example of an organization that can start something and then And it sounds like you got something really big, Jana, with your platform. So I'll really look forward to watch. We watch this space very closely. Maybe in a year's time, we'll have you back and talk about what progress you've made since. But I think if people are looking for employment in the future, the energy sector or affiliated with the energy sector, because there's so much happening or is going to have to happen, that it's a great space because just change and innovation will be critical for us to be successful and for individual companies to be successful as well.
It's been fun.
Thank you so much.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360 Energy Inc. Tune in to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or other listening platforms by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. Email us your feedback at podcast@360energy.net or comment on our LinkedIn posts. See you next week.